Ferrari did not silence Mercedes at Silverstone by finding more energy. They silenced them by making Mercedes waste the energy they already had. That was the genius. Mercedes came into the British Grand Prix with the advantage that should have controlled the race. Extra deployment on the straights. Stronger defense under pressure. The power to stop Charles Leclerc before Ferrari could turn pressure into victory. But Ferrari saw the hidden weakness. Energy is only dangerous when Mercedes chooses when to use it. So Ferrari took that choice away. Leclerc stayed close enough to force decisions. Every straight became a threat. Every defensive move became a cost. Every lap made Mercedes ask the question they did not want to ask. Spend now, or suffer later? Save now, or risk Ferrari attacking? Defend the position, or protect the battery? That was the trap. Ferrari did not destroy Mercedes' energy advantage by overpowering it. They destroyed it by turning it into pressure. And in a dramatic British Grand Prix, with Leclerc taking victory, Antonelli's issue changing the race, and post-race penalties complicating the final result, Ferrari exposed the truth Mercedes did not want the grid to see. Their strongest weapon was not invincible. It only worked when Mercedes controlled the timing. Ferrari stole the timing. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Ferrari's plan worked, you have to understand the trap hidden inside every energy advantage. Energy feels like power. But in Formula 1, energy is really control. It lets a driver defend on the straight. It gives the car extra punch when a rival gets close. It allows the team to decide when to attack, when to save, and when to protect track position. That is why Mercedes looked so dangerous at Silverstone. Their energy advantage should have given them options everywhere that mattered. If Leclerc got close, Mercedes could deploy. If Ferrari threatened on the straight, Mercedes could defend. If the gap started shrinking, Mercedes had the tool to stretch it back out. On paper, that sounds almost impossible to break. But Ferrari noticed the weakness. Mercedes' advantage only worked perfectly if Mercedes controlled the timing. And Ferrari's entire plan was built around stealing that timing away. That is the first part people miss. Ferrari did not need to make Mercedes slow everywhere. They needed to make Mercedes uncomfortable in the moments where Mercedes wanted to be calm. Because at Silverstone, calm is everything. This track is not a simple drag race. It is a chain of high-speed decisions. One corner affects the next straight. One defensive line affects the next exit. One energy deployment affects the next opportunity to attack or defend. A mistake does not stay isolated. It travels. So if Mercedes used energy too early, that choice could echo later in the lap. If they defended too hard, they could hurt the tires. If they protected one section, they might expose another. If they saved too much, Leclerc could get closer. Ferrari understood that Silverstone would punish every small compromise. So they decided to create compromises. Not one. Many. That was the genius. Leclerc did not have to attack like a desperate driver on every lap. In fact, that would have ruined the plan. A wild attack would have allowed Mercedes to respond once, use the energy, cover the move, and reset the race. Ferrari needed pressure that lasted longer than one move. They needed Leclerc to become a constant threat. Close enough to make Mercedes defend. Close enough to make the pit wall nervous. Close enough to turn every straight into a decision. But not so reckless that he burned through his own tires before the real chance arrived. That is a very difficult balance. Too far back, and Mercedes breathes. Too close, and Ferrari suffers. Too aggressive, and Mercedes blocks once. Too passive, and the race disappears. Leclerc had to live in the middle. Threatening, but patient. Aggressive, but controlled. Close enough to hurt Mercedes, but calm enough to let the damage build. And that is where the energy advantage began to change. At the start, Mercedes' energy was a weapon. Ferrari turned it into a shield. Then, slowly, they turned the shield into a burden. Every time Mercedes used energy to cover Leclerc, Ferrari had forced a payment. A little deployment. A little tire stress. A little lost freedom. A little more pressure on the next decision. One payment means almost nothing. But a Grand Prix is not one with one payment. It is one when those payments keep coming. Lap after lap, Ferrari made Mercedes spend something. Not always enough for the audience to notice immediately. Not always enough to create a dramatic move. But enough to change the feeling of the race. Because once Mercedes had to keep responding, they were no longer dictating. They were reacting. And reacting is the first sign that control is slipping away. That is the hidden difference between a team leading a race and a team defending a race. A team leading with control chooses its moments. It saves when it wants. It deploys when it wants. It keeps the car inside the cleanest version of the plan. A team defending under pressure has to answer questions it did not ask. Should we spend now? Should we save? Can we afford to let Ferrari closer? Can we afford to use more energy here? Will the tire survive if we defend harder? That is exactly where Ferrari wanted Mercedes. Inside questions. Because questions steal confidence. And confidence is what makes an energy advantage feel bigger than it really is. When a driver knows the energy will be there at the perfect moment, he drives with certainty. He positions the car more calmly. He defends with less panic. He trusts the straight will protect him. But when he starts wondering whether he has used too much, or whether the next attack is coming sooner than expected, the advantage becomes heavier. It becomes something to manage. Something to protect. Something to worry about. That is not the same as domination. Ferrari's plan was not to remove Mercedes' weapon. It was to make Mercedes carry it. Think of it like holding a shield in a fight. If you lift it once at the perfect moment, it saves you. But if someone keeps forcing you to lift it again and again, even without landing a clean hit, your arm starts to tire. The shield is still there. It still works. But now it costs you every time you use it. Ferrari did that with Mercedes' energy. They made the shield heavy. And Silverstone made the punishment worse, because the circuit does not give easy recovery. It is fast, flowing, and relentless. The car is loaded for long stretches. The driver needs confidence through corners where hesitation kills lap time. The straights are important, but the corners before them decide how powerful the car looks when it gets there. That is why Ferrari's pressure was so clever. They were not only attacking the straights. They were attacking the exits that fed the straights. If Mercedes had to defend into one phase, it could affect how they launched out of the next. If they had to use energy to protect one section, Ferrari could keep the threat alive for another. If Mercedes started thinking too much about deployment, they could lose the freedom to manage the entire lap smoothly. Ferrari turned one advantage into many small problems. Energy became battery management. Battery management became tire stress. Tire stress became pace pressure. Pace pressure kept Leclerc close. And Leclerc staying close forced more energy decisions. That loop is what cracked Mercedes. Pressure creates spending. Spending creates compromise. Compromise creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates more pressure. Once Mercedes was inside that loop, the advantage was still there, but it was no longer clean. And a dirty advantage is much easier to beat than a clean one. That is why Ferrari's opening phase mattered so much. They were not just waiting for the race to come to them. They were shaping the race before the decisive moment arrived. That matters because the British Grand Prix was not simple. Leclerc won a dramatic race. Antonelli's issue changed the shape of the contest. Post-race penalties complicated the final result. In a race like that, the team with the cleanest theoretical advantage does not always win. The team that adapts best wins. Ferrari made Mercedes less adaptable by forcing them to spend attention and energy before the race fully opened. That is why the plan was genius. Ferrari did not rely on luck. They prepared Mercedes to suffer when the race became messy. A lucky team benefits from chaos. A smart team makes sure the rival is carrying extra weight before chaos arrives. Mercedes was carrying that weight. The weight of Leclerc in the mirrors. The weight of defensive energy use. The weight of not knowing whether saving now would cost them later. The weight of an advantage that was supposed to provide comfort, but had become a responsibility. And responsibilities slow teams down. Not always on the stopwatch immediately, but in decision-making. In confidence. In how early a driver deploys. In how cautiously a team protects the next phase. That is the invisible damage Ferrari created. And it all started with the same idea. Do not fear Mercedes' energy. Force Mercedes to use it. That is what separated Ferrari's plan from a normal chase. A normal chase waits for a mistake. Ferrari created the conditions for mistakes to become more likely. They kept the pressure close enough that Mercedes could not ignore it. They made every defensive choice carry a cost. They turned the energy advantage into something that had to be used repeatedly, and not always at the perfect moment. That is how you silence a strength. You do not always need to overpower it. Sometimes you make it speak too early, and by the time it needs to be loud, it has already lost its force. That is what happened to Mercedes at Silverstone. Their energy advantage still mattered. It did not vanish. It was not destroyed like a broken part. But Ferrari changed its meaning. Instead of being the thing Mercedes used to control the race, it became the thing Mercedes had to keep spending to stop Ferrari from taking control. That difference is everything. And that is why Leclerc's patience was so important. He did not need to win the race in the first attack. He needed to keep the question alive. Can Mercedes defend again? Can they save enough? Can they stop Ferrari without paying too much? Can they still use their advantage later if they are forced to use it now? Those questions built the pressure. And once enough pressure built, Mercedes' advantage started to crack where it was weakest. Not in raw power. In timing. Ferrari stole the timing, and once they stole that, the race began moving toward them. But Ferrari's plan did not end with making Mercedes spend energy. That was only the first cut? The second cut was deeper, because Ferrari forced Mercedes into a fight where their energy advantage stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like pressure. And that is where Silverstone began to turn. Because when a team has a technical advantage, the dream scenario is simple. Use it calmly. Use it cleanly. Use it when it matters. Mercedes wanted to do exactly that. They wanted to deploy energy in the right zones, defend when necessary, and keep enough performance in reserve for the moments when Ferrari became dangerous. But Ferrari's pressure made that dream version almost impossible. Leclerc was not just close. He was close at the wrong moments for Mercedes. Close enough to make saving energy feel risky. Close enough to make defending feel necessary. Close enough to make every straight feel like a decision point instead of a safe zone. That is the difference between chasing and hunting. A chasing driver follows. A hunting driver changes what the leader is allowed to do. Leclerc was hunting. And when a driver is hunting properly, the car in front starts to lose freedom. That is exactly what happened to Mercedes. They still had the energy advantage, but now every use of it came with a question attached. If they deployed to defend, would they have enough later? If they saved, would Leclerc get the run he needed? If they protected the straight, would they compromise the next part of the lap? If they drove harder to break the pressure, would the tires pay the price? Ferrari had turned a technical strength into a strategic dilemma. That is why this plan was so clever. It did not ask Ferrari to be perfect everywhere. It asked Mercedes to make imperfect choices. And in Formula 1, forcing your rival into imperfect choices is often more powerful than having the faster car. Because an imperfect choice creates a chain reaction.